Mm.
All right. So I have just prepared this particular PPT just as a kind of a reference when we actually go through this particular session. And based on the WhatsApp, no, based on the WhatsApp ping from multiple groups, I get tried to consolidate some of the, or rather whatever I actually received in the ping. So whenever the appropriate scenario comes in, if in case the person who had typed this particular scenario in the WhatsApp has been participating in this particular session, you can please pitch in and then try to set the context in a better manner so that we as a team can try to generate multiple perspectives. Okay, so first of all, the agenda of this particular thing is that we are now trying to understand on a day-to-day basis what are all the general problems that we face as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach. Okay, and then trying to brainstorm together as a team what are the different ways by which we can solve it. Of course, we cannot guarantee that a single solution is definitely going to solve the problem. So that intent of this particular webinar is to generate multiple perspectives so that depending upon the contextual need, only actually which particular solution will actually suit the problem statement or rather address the concern in a better manner. Okay, so what I request is people can all go on mute whenever needed. You can unmute and then talk because soon after this session, this particular thing will also be uploaded on the social media platform. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is to give a quick introduction about about myself in terms of the overall years of experience and experience in the agile world and what I'm doing as part of the this particular agile mentorship program. Okay, and then in terms of my educational qualifications. And this slide is to just to tell you that probably I could be considered as one of the person deemed fit to talk on this particular deemed fit to talk on this particular subject of agile. This is just to tell that okay, these are all the different certifications I have done so that I know to some extent different aspects of agile and in terms of my role and designation. Okay, just to introduce the host to you. Okay, nothing apart from that. Okay, so getting into the core webinar, okay, so these are all the scenarios which has been given in the WhatsApp. So can we get into the slides or can we do it in a manner that people can ask some questions and then I'll try to respond to it, or how is that we wanted? Just wanted to know your thoughts.
Maybe we can do parallelly, sir. Maybe we can go on scenario one and then question something like
Yeah.
that.
So what I request is, if in case the person who had given this particular scenario is actually attending this particular webinar, can please unmute and then try to echo the concern. If not, we will try to do it here. All right. Okay. So looks like the situation is like this. Okay, which has been shown in the slide. So that particular squad has a tester who has been removed for whatever be the reason, and then the RT is actually trying to say that okay, with the help of the BA and the dev team, can you actually no, can you actually manage it? But then the BA and the dev team are obviously are not interested to actually uh, no actually do it, and it actually looks like a vendor client model. So they convey to an RTE to convince the team, but they are very keen on their goals. A kind of a real time situation. So before I share my perspectives, anyone wanted to add their thoughts? It will be good. So let me take a notepad. 1 second. Okay, so the situation is because in a real time situation, all these kinds of concerns or all these kinds of issues. Okay, see now the point is what I like to say is don't expect Agile to solve all the problem first of all, because practically speaking, we cannot expect Agile to be a silver bullet to solve all your problems. So for some of the problems, yes, within the framework of Scrum or Kanban or Scaled Agile framework, you can take some pointers to solve the problem. But if there is a systemic issue, you may need to decouple the problem from the word agile. You may need to look into other aspects or dimensions of that organization, or you may need to talk to the PMO, or you may need to talk to the project manager or the program manager or your resource manager. So don't expect that a framework called Scrum or Kanban or SAFe, just by implementing these particular framework, all the problems will be solved. Absolutely no. Okay, so I just want to put that particular because based on my experiential learning, I'm saying frameworks are enablers, frameworks are means to get the work done. Framework by itself is not going to solve the problem. What is the other processes that you are trying to augment around the framework? Those process effectiveness combined with the framework is going to solve the problem. Okay. So any perspectives to this particular slide? Because we have quite a few scenarios, so we can quickly discuss one by one and then we can go to the next one. Anyone want to go for answering this?
This is Hitesh.
Yes,
I just want to understand what is the expectation here? Like, are they telling the problem and they are expecting it like some kind of solution here? What is expected from this scenario? Because it says that my RT said to me that do sprint testing with the help of BA and dev, but both of them are doing without interest. So like what's the expectation? I'm not able to get.
That is one concern. The thing is that I'm just trying to understand whether the person who had typed this particular scenario is participating in the webinar or not.
Okay, I will share one scenario that I'm currently facing in my team right now. Okay. And I'm not following SAFe. It's purely agile. So what has happened is recently there is another project that has come up, and that is having a higher priority, and we had a shared resource, shared QA resource across two teams, but that person is actually required for this new project which is having a higher priority. So he has to be removed from my current project for a time frame, let's say 3 months, or let's say like 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 sprints, he has to be away from that project. So for that, what was the suggestion that was given is like earlier also the team was able to approach with this full stack approach where they can actually do the testing as well. So they have suggested to just go with this full stack approach for some time, like maybe for interim time, and later on after they have the new resource joining, I think they will bring back the old QA to the team. So that's how we have approached it for now, but we already told to managers and also to the product owner and to the respective people, like this will definitely reduce our team velocity, because one, not everyone is skilled as a QA, and they cannot really work as efficient as the trained QA who is actually working earlier. So it will definitely reduce. If our velocity is maybe 50, it will come down to maybe 20. So we had already told that to the people, and everyone has agreed to that, and we are going to try it out. But this is just a real-time scenario. I don't think that there's a straightforward solution and this is how you should go. I think we need to find out some workaround around those situations. And
okay, so practically speaking, some of the situations can't be solved fully, which we may also need to agree. All that we can do is to mellow down the impact of that particular situation. We cannot completely eliminate certain things in the system, but what we can do is instead of a 70% of a damage, if you are able to quantify it, probably if you do some kind of a better planning, or if we do some kind of a process or some kind of a mechanism, we can mellow down the impact. Let me tell what actually comes to my mind, and then we can discuss as a team. This particular challenge, even in the waterfall model, we have similar kind of challenges, because sometimes what will happen when there is a priority toggle, resource shuffling need to be done. So one guy will be pulled out, or one person need to be deployed. So in a traditional waterfall model, this will be handled by a concept called a resource leveling, right? So in the Gantt chart, when I'm actually doing a planning in the Gantt chart, I can assign a resource and then make that resource as a shared resource. And I believe we have something called hard dependency and soft dependency. All that we need to be careful here is that what about the contribution percentage of this particular person across the multiple projects, and whether it has been proactively or rather factored in the capacity planning. So when you do the sprint planning itself, in the capacity planning sheet, if this transition between the projects and one new resource will join, and once that new person joins, then probably QA resource can be brought in. All these kind of dynamics, is it been factored in the capacity planning itself? Accordingly, the story points need to be committed, generally speaking, so that the variability percentage will actually come down. Once the variability comes down, the predictability is obviously going to increase. Okay, this is one thing. And for some teams, we have a term called a focus factor. Some of you actually know it. Focus factor is a term which we generally use it in the capacity planning calculation to tell how focused the team is. Because team A, team B, I cannot give focus factor as the same number for both the teams. So in the focus factor, probably you can decrease the focus factor and then give a lesser number. Okay, let me take a pause here because I just wanted to hear from some other people also. Okay, this is how I will be approaching it. Anyone like to comment on any thoughts here? Like
Yes,
how will you manage
Suresh
the
this side.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Bala?
Yes, yes.
Suresh, Bala, I have a small question here. Okay, now you don't have a full-fledged QA out there, and the dev team is going to augment that as part of our full-stack approach. How can we ensure that the quality release happens? Won't there be an impact?
See, there actually could be an impact depending upon multiple factors. See, for example, let me make it very simple. What is an output? It is a combination of input plus process. You are applying processing mechanism on an input to get an output, anything for that matter. Now, any change in the input or any change in the processing capability is fundamentally going to have some impact on the output. But what is the extent of the impact, that we need to measure it later using appropriate metrics in place. So will it have an impact? It may have an impact depending upon the complexity of the problem, or depending upon the complexity of the project also, right? So it actually depends on many factors. We cannot give a generalized answer. Let's say that particular shared resource is a critical resource and he knows the subsystem of the project in a better manner. And if that guy has been pulled out, then do you have, see, when we say cross-functional team, do we really have cross-functional team? All those parameters need to be assessed before we comment on that particular question. Right?
But I have a question. So in Agile, is it possible to achieve the cross-functional team?
I think at the beginning, no. You cannot see. The point is this: you will not get a cross-functional team, but over a period of time, we are expected to make the existing team to become cross-functional. Let me put it like that way. Over a period of time, one of the responsibility of an agile coach or a scrum master is to do a demand in terms of the capability matrix, in terms of what are all the current capabilities of the team and what are all the skills or competencies needed for the project, and then you do a gap analysis. So you speak to the leadership or a management team to give a training session to plug the gap. However, trainings will give only orientation. Training by itself will not give the full capability. You may need to execute few sprints or rather even few program increments. Over a period of time, you can make your existing team to be cross-functional. Luckily, if you are getting a cross-functional team, then it's a happy path. But happy path generally do not happen always to all. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but it's over the period of time it will happen.
So the point is, yeah. So the point is, one of the way to make a team self-organized, first make the team cross-functional. Once the team becomes cross-functional, automatically the team will become self-organized. Because nowadays, we don't need people managers. We need only process managers because people are self-organized. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ranju.
Again, let me take a pause here. Do we think this question is really only oriented to agile engagements? No, right? Even in a product development space or even in a waterfall model, when you are getting into a project, we need to know what are the skills or technical expertise needed for the project and where are we in terms of the demand fulfillment. When I say demand fulfillment, it is not just fulfilling the headcount of the people, it is fulfilling the capabilities needed for the project.
There's
Bala,
a
can
slight difference is there when we see in the waterfall model or V model or in the agile, where the time to delivery in the agile is very fast. In the sense that time to learn is very short.
Correct.
So whereas if you see in the waterfall model, you will get some time for yourself, to becoming expert on a particular area.
Okay.
So, but having said that, the delivery timelines also will be planned accordingly in the waterfall model. But whereas in the agile, it is not like that, I feel.
So it becomes even more relevant to actually have a cross-functional team, right? So since you have only time-boxed activities, even more disciplined and more caution and diligence need to be exhibited in an agile project, because once you lose the time, once you not track the time, it will become very difficult to catch up with the time, because a program increment itself is only 8 to 12 weeks maximum, going by the guidelines of the program incremental planning. So what actually we have actually done is, in one of our lean agile center of excellence, or you call it as an agile transformation office, or I have worked in some of the engagements where we call it as a AEO, agile enablement office, wherein we will proactively see for the next 2 quarters what are all the pipeline projects and what are all the capabilities needed for those projects. Do we have that capability? Do we have the capability in-house? Any kind of a training needs to be done, or what needs to be done? If you do proactive planning, you can address it before it becomes important and urgent. You need to work on this when the time it is important, but not urgent. So you have time to work on it. By the time it is already inside the funnel, if you start looking for resources, then the problem comes. Okay.
Yeah. I think Balaji, that's right. Yeah.
See, the point is timing matters a lot. No, it is not just doing the right things. It is doing the right things at the right time only will actually give the value, and that is the fundamental meaning of a cost of delay. The same activity, if I do it after 2 weeks, it is not going to create any business value. It is going to create a revenue loss, because by the time some other competitor would have shipped a similar feature to the production and the market would have been conquered. So that is the fundamental principle of a cost of delay. Loss of cost or revenue loss because of the delay incurred. So my suggestion here is, if you have a project management office, it is not just to know giving some templates or giving some checklist or only talking about the best practices. It is about understanding the ecosystem, understanding the organization, and then coming up with some kind of a measures in a proactive manner, so that all these systemic issues will be taken care. Okay. So maybe like I have given some sparks only, with that one can tread the path further. In the interest of time, let me go to the next one. Okay, if needed, we can come back to it later. Okay. This is one more scenario. Here, this particular person says how to implement one product owner concept, because in this paragraph I can see that there are multiple people playing with the product owner. It is mentioned here where the influencing product owner is busy most of the time, but always want to have what or she wants during demo, that too immediately before release. The one who acts as a PO mostly agrees instead of a pushback. So what we understand here is that maybe you have a product owner or a proxy product owner. See, actually speaking, there is no role called a proxy product owner. But still, I am using the word proxy product owner so that echo to just to echo with the reality, what happens in the industry. We have only product owner and a business analyst. We are not having any role called a proxy product owner. But this paragraph seems to echo that we have someone who is also acting on behalf of the product owner. And if he says okay, but the same question comes back, why it is taking so long and expects team to work weekend to fix it. So it actually looks to me, right, no, looks to me that one of the product owners says that okay, we can give time, but one more product owner is pressing for the deadlines. Every change will take an half an hour, but dev testing, automation are safely ignored. Okay, is the person there in the webinar by any chance? I think no. Okay. So what thoughts come to your mind?
Balaji, in this scenario, I fail to understand if there is a proxy product owner also, they both should be in sync, right? Normally, if one is acting as proxy, he'll always be synced up with the original product owner, and if there is some contradiction between them, then it's a different problem altogether. I feel.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So since the person who has given the question is not there, we may need to go by case by case basis. One thing, as you rightly mentioned, why there is a communication back between the so-called product owner and the proxy product owner. That particular thing needs to be uh, fixed. The second thing is why we have two product owners. First of all, is it something like the business analyst is called as a product owner? See, that is why what we generally tell is, when you are starting a new team, it is better to create a team charter working agreement. So in the team charter working agreement, what are all the roles and the responsibilities of all these people need to be clearly articulated. See, everyone knows what a product owner does, but what does the product owner does in that ecosystem? Because every project is a unique, right? So it is always better to explicitly call it out in the team charter working agreement, what is the roles and responsibilities. And one more thing, that particular team charter working agreement also need to be periodically reviewed. And in my assessment questionnaire, agile maturity assessment questionnaire, there actually should be some validation lines which is going to check, does my team charter working agreement is periodically reviewed? So all these checks and balances should be there. Do you agree to my say or any other difference of opinion?
Agreed, Balaji. It also, if you look at the engagement, we have a team, PO and agile team working with a client for last 20 years.
Okay.
So situation there, it will be different. Highly experienced people, very long-term trust and engagement is there.
Correct.
The explained scenario by you will be different. If it is a first time engagement, a new team and the inexperienced team, things are very different. So I think this is contextual.
Correct.
And I agree to whatever you just said, Balaji.
Okay, so my say is that once I understand, okay, why we have two people, see, maybe in the first few sprints, you are bound to have hiccups because that is how we learn things, no? When you ride a bicycle, it is quite obvious that we fall down for the first few times. Okay, if not, how will we learn things? So it is bound to happen. But if there is an experienced agile coach, the impact of falling down can be minimized. That's what we were trying to say. Because an experienced agile coach is someone who has seen different flavors of teams, both experienced team, both right from the scratch. So we know by spending some 2 to 3 hours with the team in any of the ceremonies, an experienced coach can read the pulse of the team. Okay, where are they currently? What are all the quick wins for this particular team? And from where does the problem comes? Is it from the product side or from the process mechanism or due to lack of technical agility? What is the concern area? So those things will come out of experience. Now you can address it in that manner. The second thing what it says is, how to push back the change during the sprint, because this has different different segments. Okay, how to push back the change during the sprint. Generally, he says it is okay if he is going to delay, but question comes back saying it is taking so long and expects team to work over weekend. Every change will take half an hour or 1 hour, but dev testing, automation test cases, other efforts are safely ignored. Okay, so let me tell one simple example. Somewhere in 2012, I think, somewhere in 2012 or 13, when I was working as a like a Scrum Master come project manager kind of a role, what happened is one of my client from Singapore, he was actually having a meeting with the product owner and the Scrum Master group, and he was saying that, hey, why are you guys taking so much time just to move a button from the top left corner to the bottom right corner? So it is like a UI or a UX. It is like a UI UX related task. So because see, I just want to tell you this example because I felt it bit to be relevant for you. Okay, let's say you have a button here, and he was asking me, hey, why are you taking so much time to just move a button from here to here? It looks like if you change the cursor position, it will be done. Immediately, I actually intervened in the meeting and then told, see, it is not like that, because the page is being divided into a header section and the main page. And in the main page, all these portions have been written using a kind of a Ajax control call. It is not only cascaded, it's not only CSS, and it is not only div tags. And if I want to take a button and put it here, just by changing the cursor coordinate, it's not going to work. I need to embed this particular frame as an object in my Ajax control call. And if I do it, all other controlling pages need to be changed. So what I did is I stood up and I justified, hey, what's really happening behind the screen? So sometimes Scrum Masters may not have that knowledge to understand about the project, or your technical lead should actually help you to justify it is not what we see is the reality. Behind the screen, lot of things happen. If you justify with some data and with some technical stack, then people will listen to you. For that, you need to know what happens behind the screen. When you click a button, the next page comes, okay, and you fill a value, that's fine. But what happens behind the screen? When you click a button, where does the call go? And that particular service call invokes what? If you know that grip, then people will listen to you. Any suggestions for me?
Makes sense.
But do Agile
Someone
coaches,
says it is true. Sometimes
you're right.
the technical PO will, okay. See,
Balaji, I think your explanation is good, but I think is it the answer for the point number 2? I'm still not convinced actually.
No, I was just saying, yeah. See, I was just saying for this one, why it is taking long time. We need to understand what happens behind the screen to really answer such kind of a questions. No, I'm just giving it as an example.
Sure.
For my
One
bold
thing
font, this
one
is a
thing to
serious
add there,
problem.
Balaji, is like for the second point, we should also communicate. Like sometimes it is just a question about the particular feature that why it is delaying, but other times what happens is there is a new feature or there is a new task or maybe a production case has come, which actually need to be accommodated in the sprint. So during that time, if something is getting delayed, I think it's mainly that the team has to communicate and Scrum Master need to communicate to the product owner, making him understand that if you're actually going to take this feature in or a particular task which he's telling to pull inside the sprint, then it is definitely going to impact the sprint and the planned items, maybe some of the items, if there are 5 items, maybe all of them will not be completed, only 4 will be completed. So those things we need to communicate. I think that also matters when this kind of situation happens.
Yes, and one more thing what we need to have is, you need to have clarity on the different work item types. This is something which I repeatedly told in my previous webinars. Maybe for some of the participants who are attending my webinar, it may be a new thing. But what we need to do is, before you get into the capacity planning or the sprint planning, you need to understand in terms of user stories, production defects, maintenance related task, incident and support tickets. Okay, let's say for example, incident and support tickets, compliance activities, and probably time spent for enablers and the spikes, because enablers and spikes are going to be part of your architectural runway. Okay, compliance is production.
And, there is a spike and bug also there. Spike and bug also, it will come under product backlog work item type.
Yeah, defects I have put it. Bug is called a defect.
Yeah.
So what we can do, it could be a production defect or it could be a within the sprint defect. Means it is not a non-prod defect. Okay, you can take it like this. One is a prod defect, one is a non-prod defect. It could be either a SIT, UAT, or a unit testing defect or anywhere. So see, the way I used to do this capacity planning, long back, not now, because now my teams are doing it. So what I used to do is, I used to study the pattern of the input demand queue. Okay, what comes into my product backlog in what variety? Because a subset of the product backlog is only going to be your sprint backlog, correct? So, for example, for a particular team, it could be 40% user stories, 5% production defects. 5% itself is a bad number in terms of a prod defects. Okay, non-prod defects, let's put it as a 10%. Maintenance activities could be, I'm just giving 10%. Then one more activity is that tech refresh initiatives. Okay, these particular activities, let's say 5%. Incident and support tickets should be 10%. So what am I saying is that if we have clarity and grip at this level, what is the mix of my product backlog? What is the mix of my sprint backlog? Believe me, you can do better planning. And from where will I get the data? Obviously from the team. Within the team, over a period of 2 to 3 sprints, you should be able to see the pattern. See, no one will come and tell us these numbers explicitly. You need to sometimes read between the lines and pull out inferences and see a pattern. See, these numbers are given for example, but had you done this much level of justice, if you do this much level of justice at the beginning of the sprint, then in the middle of the sprint, if any higher priority task comes, no need to panic. We know what to do because we know which one I can remove so that I can create a placeholder to plug in the new things. But then see, it is like I'm okay. Let me tell like in this manner. See, 1 second here. See, it is like you need to pull the string from both the points, right? You need to do a better capacity planning, obviously from the team side. Also, you need to understand from the product management or the product owner space, hey, why such activities coming the first time? Once in a while, it is okay. If there are too many requirements coming in as a pattern, then it is a concern. You need to pull the string from both opposite directions and then tie the knot at a point of minimum discordant. In English, they call it as a discordant, right? You need to find the place where I can pull both the knots and then tie it. Working here alone is not going to solve the problem. Working here alone is not going to solve the problem. You may need to act from both the sides, and then only you can solve the problem. Any suggestions?
Balaji, Sanjay here. See, these are things that has to be handled during planning phase itself, right?
Which one?
And whenever one see these sort of planning, what exactly we need to do it for the entire sprint, it should happen during planning stage itself. Sometimes there is a deviation. Anyway, we have this retrospective meeting where we can try to come up with an action item saying like, so in between we are trying to add additional requirements, which is also impacting the sprint. We can try to create some action item for that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, see, the one point is retrospectives are definitely powerful enough, but retrospectives cannot solve problem for the already happened sprint, right?
Correct. So see, once in a while it happens, we can't even stop it, but we can try to explain this to product owner and try to push some of the item to next sprint, right?
Yeah. So what is needed is, you may need to have a governance model here, how to handle requirements within a sprint. Some kind of a governance mechanism, which is going to tell, okay, if there are any changes in the middle of the sprint, I can accept the change, provided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some other things need to be compromised, saying that a lower priority story need to be removed, or whereas this particular change should actually resonate well with the goal of the sprint. Because if it doesn't resonate well, then why to include it is my question. Or if it's so important, then why it is not called out at the beginning itself? So, and
Yeah, that is true, Balaji. In general, that is what we try doing it, right? Any additional recommend comes in, we try to push some of the current sprint item to next sprint, right?
yeah, but in the long run, no. See, all these things can be taken as a one-time fixes. It should not become a habit that every time when a new priority comes, we are de-scoping some of the committed user stories and then creating placeholders for the newly formed user stories. It is not solving the problem permanently. No, it is a temporary fix.
In fact, it aggravates the problem. The team gets slightly so frequent context switching definitely impacted their rhythm.
Correct.
Yes, we do have this kind of pressures. That's where the Scrum Master plays a role, where how well we can protect the team at the same time we don't impact the business. If it is a production issue, definitely we do accommodate it by deprioritizing one of the either the maintenance item or the enabler, which is not making an impact. Number one. Number two, accepting this change also depends upon if it is in the beginning of the sprint or mid of the sprint. If the production issue, yes, it is done. If it is the penultimate day of the sprint or the last day of the sprint, we might just wait for a day.
Yes, yes.
So it depends upon the
also
situation.
depends upon the timing of the change. Fully
Yes.
agreed. See, now the point is that it also depends upon
Balaji, sorry to interrupt, actually. So this is also from, I align with the previous person. It's again, I think the question is raised from the Scrum Master point of view, right? So we should not think about the other thing, but from my point of view, what I see is that the Scrum Master should be able to explain the Scrum values to the product owner.
See, those things are fine, but let me tell you a practical answer. Most of the teams will have product owners from who is a client himself. Generally speaking, that is the challenge. Let us accept the truth. No, in most of the service,
when you leave the client or the product owner out of your process, of course, then there is a slave mastery concept. When you also travel with him, because I know you have very good experience on agile contracting, and you know how the collaboration happens between the client and the service providers, right? So in that way, there should not be any discussions or debates, because the product owner has a visibility, like I said in the previous few minutes ago, also Scrum values. So the team should have a courage to go and say that, okay, this is not possible, or there should be a commitment saying, okay, we can do it, but as you mentioned that there will be a delay on something else. Here the problem is that the Scrum Master should be able to do a small brainstorming or some kind of session to make sure that maybe for once or twice it is agreed, but going forward we should not follow this as a practice.
So what I used to do is whenever such a kind of a situation comes, because going to the leadership team always needs a data. So some kind of a scope variance report, which I used to keep in my hand, saying that for the past 3 sprint, this is what we committed, but on these particular dates, these changes got induced inside the sprint, and these changes were not aligned with the goal of the sprint. And this is the percentage of the scope variance. Probably in your Jira or somewhere, you may have your sprint gadget wherein you can quantify the percentage scope variance, and then probably put it across those numbers to the leadership team, because the leadership team will always listen to you only when you go with facts and figures, not like our concerns, sadly. So if you go with some data and then tell them this is what happened, this is what the Jira report says, this is what because of that so-called change in the middle of the sprint, this is these are all the things which happen, and we also captured it in our retrospective. Then probably a better response could be there from the management. So it all depends upon the relationship between the client and the vendor also, because typically if you take a multi-vendor project, what will happen? No, it is like adding fuel to the fire. Already the things are a bit shaky. In a multi-vendor, what will happen? Development team will be from one vendor, testing team will be one vendor, and there is always a tug of war, not because of project challenges, because they come from different vendors. Everyone need to prove themselves as smart in front of the client. Of course, I talk from my experience. You might be having a better experiences, then it is happy. But in my case, I have worked in multi-vendor projects where solving the day-to-day, the tug of war itself will expend the energy that I don't have energy to address the core issues. But it took some time for me to fix the issues over a period of 6 to 7 months. And I also started taking product owner on my side by conducting design thinking workshop to the product owner and having one-on-one conversation with the product owner. And then I slowly started taking product owner on my side. Because generally when you do one-on-one coaching, the people will be listening to you more rather than a group coaching. Product owner may not accept certain things in the front of the client. But if you talk to him or her one-on-one, the probability of acceptance will be more. So which style of coaching need to be done where? Those things also we may need to keep in mind. Okay. So here what we actually suggest here is some kind of a better governance or a requirements management framework or something should be there to do an impact analysis on the change, then take a conscious call whether to entertain it within the sprint or you can take it in the next sprint. Okay. And these things and all can be solved if you know what happens behind the screen, functionally, technically, at least to some extent, what happens behind the screen, then you can justify the people. It is for these activities, it will take these many times. And it is for this reason, it is taking more time. Something like that you can justify if you have clarity. Okay. So I'll do one thing. Let's go to the next one because I have a couple of slides. Okay. This is something like how to implement parallel dev and testing concept. So looks like especially there is a technical review from business. Current process is dev, technical review, application release in QA. Then they will complete the testing. The person told, I have tried implementing peer review kind of testing, but it is not working for complete testing. Only unit testing happens that way. Okay, so the question is like this. How to implement parallelly development and testing? Any suggestion? Yeah, any suggestion? If you have any mic issue, you can please put it in the chat also. If in case you have any audio glitches.
Yeah, Balaji, I think parallel dev and testing, if they can automate the unit testing from the development team, as in they develop the something and they can parallelly do the automate the things for the unit testing. And as per my experiences, that most of the issues when we say from the QA perspective is the critical or high issues will get addressed there. But for doing that, the dev team have to be really fair enough to do the unit testing and write down all the possible scenarios. Then the build has to go to the QA release where they can quickly test and release it to to the next level.
Okay, so let me ask. Okay, let me tell one thing. Generally speaking, if you are let's say if you are burn down chart, see everyone knows what is there in y-axis and x-axis of a burn down. So I'm not going to put it. So generally in a burn down chart like this, which is an ideal situation, either if you go like this or if you come like this, it's also okay. But generally what happens in most of the projects in Jira or Rally or version 1, it will go like this. Then on the 8th or 9th day of the sprint, it will come like this. So what it indicates, typically a mini waterfall pattern inside a sprint, right? This is a waterfall pattern, which is a phase-gated approach. Means by the time, if you take 10-day sprint, by the time the development team gives the code for testing, it is 7th day. If you take 15-day sprint, again by the time the development team gives the code for testing team, it is somewhere in the 12th day or a 13th day. Because I come from a testing background. During my initial days, I worked in Java J2E development, then performance testing with a load runner. So I know the pain of that. all the people will take their own sweet time. Just before go live, performance testing will be there, because at the time we did not add this sprint and long back. So what will happen is that everyone will kill the time, and by the time they give the code, and by the time they will tell performance testing is taking time. Absolutely yes, but when you guys gave the code to me only yesterday, within one day, how I can do performance testing of entire end-to-end system? So I fully resonate with the pain of the testing team. So one of the solution to this problem is, if you have the capability and competency in the ecosystem, go for extreme programming practices like a test-driven development, behavior-driven development, acceptance test-driven development. See, this is the solution. If implementing the solution itself is a problem, that's a different problem. But if someone asks me, how do you handle this problem? I wanted to do shift left approach. So why don't I take a test-driven development or behavior-driven development, so that your testing team drives the development and not the vice versa, right? So if you do that, if by doing test-driven development, I am actually turning the table, right? No, not even parallel. My testing team will drive the development. Testing team will tell, hey, I need only these method calls to be returned to make the test script pass. You are taking a lean approach there, which could be one way to address it. I'm not saying that's the only way, which could be one way to address it. Or generally, in some cases, what we used to do, no, we'll take that N+1 approach or something, right? If you are in the 6th sprint, I will do performance testing for the 5th sprint code base. Because one of the precondition or prerequisite for performance testing is that my build need to be functionally stable, stable, right? Only on a stable build I can do performance testing, and the current build may not be the most appropriate one. So just N-1. If you are in the 6th sprint, you can either take the 5th sprint code base or the 4th sprint code base, then do a performance testing. But then you need to be careful on merging the code sync up. Okay. Any other suggestions? Okay, can I ask, like, in this manner, if the same question is asked to one of you in an interview, what answer will you tell? Forget about whether you do it or not. Let's start from an interview point of view. I agree. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Sunil. Okay, so from an interview point of view, generally, what is that we can actually tell? Because generally in the interview, people have the tendency to show, or rather showcase, that we have the capability to solve the problem. And which is nothing wrong in that. That's a fair expectation. See, the point is simple. Hey, one second, sorry to interrupt. I just want to tell before I forget. See, in an interview, generally people have that expectation to exaggerate our capabilities. From my perspective, there is nothing wrong in it. Even companies do the same thing to get the projects. Even companies exaggerate. Hey, I have 150 coaches. I have the DevOps automated. I have DevSecOps automated. I'm not talking all the companies, but some of the companies, just to win the deal and just to impress the client, they used to tell partially they may be having, but they used to exaggerate it, and then they will get the project. See, same thing candidate also does by exaggerating their capability in their resume to get the job. The challenge is, are you able to walk the talk once you join the job? Similarly, the challenge is, does the company is able to deliver value once they get the project? If you're able to justify that, then there's nothing wrong in it, because you need to raise the bar high for you to improve, right? No one is going to raise the bar for us. Okay, fine. So I'm sorry, someone came to answer. Please go ahead, yeah. I think, okay, someone came to answer it.
No, Bala, I hear one thing. I don't know why this peer review doesn't work. I don't know in what way he says. I don't understand this. Number one. Number two is, as you rightly said, that kind of model where we are closing the stories on 9th day or 10th day of the sprint. That's the last day, penultimate day of the thing, is not a very great discipline. probably if we know how to slice our stories properly and estimate it, we could be moving it as and when it is done, not waiting for the nth day.
Balaji, I agree his point, because in my project also I had a similar problem, and we did a brainstorming in the retro meeting, and we came up with an idea of slicing the stories appropriately. And for example, if there's a story with 13 story point which cannot be sliced, then we were able to pull people to do an parallel programming on that particular story and try to work on that activity and ensure that it is being completed.
Okay, continue.
So in that case, we did a small change, and I will not say that we have 100% made it a difference, but at least 50% we have controlled this kind of activity on the other scale. And now we have motivated to use the BDD approach activity along with TDD. So that activity we have just started. Maybe the TDD and BDD approach has to be taken forward and see whether it's going to get more good results.
Correct. So one more thing is, that is the reason we are saying that you start putting WIP limits on your work in progress limits on your task board. The moment we start putting work in progress limit on your task board, simply I cannot pull the stories from the replenishment queue. What will happen is that if I put a WIP I keep hearing continuous, so please go on mute. Okay, so the point is that the moment I put a work in progress limit on a particular column, what will happen? No, it is inducing a behavioral change as a team. Because if I have something like testing 4 and if I have a development 4, I cannot keep on pulling the story. Unless and until I move the story from here to here, or rather if I want to talk from a pull-based mechanism, unless and until my testing team pulls the story from the development column, these development guys cannot pull the story from the replenishment queue. So what happens is that work in progress is such a powerful concept. Though it is told in Kanban, does not mean that you should not use it. Okay, does not mean you should use it only when you use Kanban. Even in a sprint model, even in a Scrum model, in my teams, I use work in progress. Not even at a team level, I use at all the levels. Team level, program level, portfolio level. The difference is in the team level, it will be user story. In my program level Kanban board, it will be features. In my portfolio level Kanban board, it will be epic and sub-epic. I still put a work in progress limit even on the epic itself, saying that at this time we can work only for 3 epics. You actually complete the epic unless and until I do a dynamic budgeting based on MVP. I don't know, from a particular person we keep hearing that noise. One sec.
I think it's
Balaji, I have a question actually.
Yeah, one second. So the point is, the moment you put a WIP limit, what will happen is that it induces a behavioral change. And one more thing, let me actually tell you, when you read your task board, don't read it from left to right. Read it from right to left, because whatever, I'm not getting the right one, whatever activity closer to the finish line, this has more probability to yield business value. So what I need to do to move this from here to here, what I need to do to move this something from here to here, that should be the focus. Generally, people read from here to here. See, the more you are going towards the left, you are far away from the possibility of generating business value. Focus on immediate quick wins. Whatever first priority is these items. Then you talk about what you need to pull from replenishment queue to the development. Right? Okay. Yeah.
I had a question, Balaji. This is related to the Jira board actually. Is there any, see, at this point of time, the work WIP limit I have already set. But one thing which I really did not get is like if somebody is moving user story from work in progress to forcibly to the in progress state, even though it is beyond 4 or 5, the fifth one, the additional fifth one,
Okay.
is there a force stop in the Jira board? Is there an option to force stop that it is more than 4? So you cannot pull this and you have to go back to
set an alert. You can set an alert, or even you can set an alert for two things in the Jira board. One is that if there is a violation of a WIP limit, you can create an alert, and even if you talk to Jira admin guys, they will. You can even trigger an email to that entire distribution list, which is one thing. Second thing, any story or any card, if I take this as a card, let's say in one of my project we call it as a card. Any card which is there in the column beyond 3 days or 4 days, automatically the card will pop up as a red color flag whenever we are trying to review the board. Okay, see, the point is this, all these are catalyst only. That mindset level not to violate a process policy is more important. These things may seem to be some catalyst to do the we need to see why you have to set up limit to violate.
Srinivas, can you go on mute, please?
Okay, so you may need to see what are the, like, if there is a violation, why there is a violation, because the moment it violates it, we are not going to do the swarming technique, right? See, because the very reason of putting a WIP limit is when there is a blocker and I need to adhere to the WIP limit, as a team, can we work together to fix that issue first? That the swarming behavior it is going to bring in. So violation of the WIP limit is a concern only. We need to see on how to address it.
I have a small question.
Or maybe one more option is, why don't you keep the WIP limit a bit flexible enough to accommodate all these things? Instead of putting 4, why don't you try it out with just 6? Maybe you can try it out. See, WIP limit is an empirical approach. Lean Kanban University says, LKU gives a guideline saying 1.5 times of the capacity for that column. If you have testing 4 people to do testing, let's say, maximum you can put a 6. If you have 4 people, okay, sorry. If you have 4 people to do column, okay, 4 people to do work on the testing column, 1.5 times of 4 is a 6. However, the same Lean Kanban University says, this is a guideline. You need to try it out, you need to inspect and adapt it. So setting a WIP limit is an empirical approach, which actually comes from a evidence-based management system. You set it and see, and then in your retrospective, discuss the fact. Okay, someone wants to go? Yeah.
No, Bala, it was me again. My question is, okay, we have a limit of, unless these 4 stories that is there in the QA is not cleared, moved to done, we will not pull in any more stories from the dev side. Okay, what about if the dev has completed their part and won't they be idling? Or they have to pair up with somebody else to close those cards that is been held by somebody else?
See, that is what we generally used to say. You need to set it in such a manner, you should not result in a bottleneck. Also, you should not result in something called as starvation. Starvation means sometimes what will happen, testing team will be waiting for the work from the development team. Until the testing team gives the code, and until the development team gives the code, testing team will be starving for the work. At the same time, if I put a WIP limit of, let's say, 1:1, or rather or rather 1:2, one person need to do 2 or 3 jobs simultaneously, it will kill the agility or it will create a bottleneck. So from where will I get the clue? Look into the cumulative flow diagram. Cumulative flow diagram will actually tell you where your bottleneck is. You need to see the distance between the 2 lines. Distance between 2 lines in a cumulative flow diagram should be an optimum distance. It actually should not be neither too close nor very far apart. Because if it is very far apart, then it means number of, because the queue length is more, it is a bottleneck. If the two lines are touching each other, some team is waiting for the work. So pull out inferences from the cumulative flow diagram and then come back to the board, because this board is only getting translated into a diagram, right? Am I making?
Yep. Yes. Yep. Maybe I will connect with you offline on this.
Yeah. In my LinkedIn article, I have given a detailed elucidation on how to analyze a cumulative flow diagram. Yeah, and even in my YouTube channel, there is a video itself. Okay.
Bala,
Hold on 1 second, please. Hold on. Sorry. Just. Here, if you go to my YouTube channel, I think I have given an 1 hour the actual mentoring session video itself. 1 second, I'll just show you right away here. See here, real-time agile mentoring session on Kanban metrics, agile transformation, and WSJF, right? This particular video, in this I have explained how to analyze a cumulative flow diagram, and then how to take, see here, this particular diagram, right? And how to analyze the cumulative flow diagram by corroborating or correlating with this board, and then you come on the suggestive actions. Okay, fine. So in the interest of time, I'm just cutting it a bit short. Feel free to connect with me offline. Okay. Any other suggestions? Or we'll go to the next one. Okay, how to capture why the delay was and can provide to PO when questions come after a few months. Okay, because questions come back to the team after a few months, we are using Jira. That is okay. How to capture why the delay was? Any suggestions before I answer it?
Maybe using Confluence to sprint after sprint. In Confluence, you can maintain as a Scrum Master the reasonings and have it recorded and stored.
So you can also do a value stream mapping kind of an activity. It means what? It means wherever the line comes down, it is a waiting time. Let's say 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. Wherever it is an up curve, it is an active time. 2, let's say 4, and let's say 1. So here, if I want to quickly tell the flow efficiency, it is 2 plus 4 plus this 2 plus 4 plus 4 plus 1, correct? Whatever be 2, 4, 4, 1 divided by the entire number. So what it is? 4, 4, 4, 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 plus 4, 15, 16, 17, 18. If you multiply this by 100, that is going to give the flow efficiency from a value stream mapping point of view. So what am I trying to do? See, if you feel difficulty to understand this concept, let us take a simple example. Everyone has it 24 hours in a day. So your denominator is going to be 24. In that 24 hours, how much of time do you spend productively, yielding some value to you, either to your personal life or your financial life or your career or your health, whatever it is, you feel as value, because value is a subjective phenomenon. I cannot define your value. You need to define. But still, the general guidelines is anything which is going to improve your health, your overall well-being, your financial condition, and your relationship, your job and career aspect can be considered as a value. Some people have spiritual goals also. So anything oriented is value. You take your productive time and then you divide it by 24 into 100. Believe me, most of us will not even cross a 50%, because I have done this for me. And there were days I literally don't know where my time goes. But at least I am conscious about that I am losing my time somewhere. So flow efficiency is something which is going to tell, okay, why these times, why the waiting day is 3 days here? Is it really deemed fit to have 3 days? So what we need to do is very simple. Instead of focusing on Scrum, Kanban, Safe, all these are okay. Focus on certain things: defects, delays, dependencies, impediments, or you put it as a blocker also. I don't want to confuse by smaller differences. Impediments or blockers, and no risk. If you handle all these 5 things in a very good manner, automatically the flow of value will be there, independent of the framework used. I can still build my own framework called customized agile framework. And then if I keep a tab on all these 5 things, and if I resolve it in a proactive manner, believe me, the value will flow continuously.
Well, I'm unable to hear you. I don't know about others.
Okay, what about others?
Yeah, we are unable to hear.
You are able to hear, right? One second, yeah. 1 second. Not sure what went wrong. Hello?
Yeah, Balaji, we are able to
Yeah,
hear you.
it's audible.
Actually, what happened? Seems to be, I'm not sure. My network router is showing good signal strength. I don't know what went wrong. It was showing connecting. Anyway, I'll just share it. And now I doubt how much got a recording. Okay. Anyway, those things I'll check later. Okay, where I left you or where I missed it? Can anyone tell me?
We are talking about these 5 things: impediments, blockers, and risks. By the time when you
Delays, dependencies, impediments or blockers are the risk. If you have good grip on all these 5 things, automatically the flow of value will be taken care. Now the point here is, okay, this I can do it within a Scrum team or a Kanban team. If I have team of teams, then what to do? There comes the concept of you are safe. That actually doesn't mean just by implementing safe, automatically the value is going to flow. Absolutely no. Yes, if you properly implement safe, everything which safe tells, if you understand the principle and then do it, yes, the value will flow. But what happens in most of the organization, people will talk at a practice level without understanding the underlying principle behind it. So the problem comes. Because half knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance, right? Either you need to have full knowledge with clarity. Half knowledge is more a danger. So generally when I create an outcome-based plan, I will focus on these 5 things. And I will create an outcome-based plan saying, reduce cycle time, let's say for a team, by 10%, sprint after sprint. If they say, no, Balaji, sprint after sprint, it is very difficult. And then I will do PI after PI. PI after PI, I wanted the cycle time to be reduced by 10%. So that indirectly what I am saying, I am telling my team to focus on the dependencies. The moment I handle dependencies in a better manner, my cycle time will come down. My lead time will also come down. The throughput increases. Okay, so what to tell? Just to cut a long story short, how to capture the why? One of the answer is maintain an impediment tracker. You like we are all saying that we have impediments, no? Create an impediment tracker. Start measuring the aging of the impediments, and just to flash it out in the meeting saying that, hey, this impediment is open for 4 days. What is the ETA? Who is actually working on it? Something like that you may need to do. Because we know that we are measuring the defects using a defect aging. Why don't you do the same thing for an impediment? Why do we expect someone else to come and tell you to do this? This is a simple thing only, right? So like that, you may need to find out, okay, can I do something to fix this problem? And that something need not be always told by the framework. That's what I am actually trying to tell. Don't expect frameworks to tell or echo you each and everything. Frameworks will give you guidelines. You need to run the show out of your experience. Of course, for me also, when I was a Scrum Master in 2012 or 13, it was a new thing. Someone asked me, my project manager asked me, what is the aging of the impediment? Then a click happened. Hey, I should have proactively maintained an impediment tracker. See, maintaining it in Jira Rally version 1 is okay for a centralized reporting mechanism, but this thinking has nothing to do with the tool. Tool is an enabler. That's it. Nothing apart from that. Tomorrow, if your Jira license become very expensive, then your same company is going to tell, hey, forget about Jira, let us go for a version 1. So do you then mean to tell that Jira is only giving agility? Absolutely no. Right? So try to decouple the tool from the process wherever possible, as much as you need to decouple a data from a code. Loosely couple it. Okay. So something like that, you measure the aging of the impediment, you do an value stream mapping kind, you understand the flow and try to see what are all the factors which has killed the flow and try to quantify the number, and then you can take the number as pointers for a further discussion. Okay, let us keep going. I have one more slide. Okay. Someone told me, please talk about challenges in converting from waterfall to Scrum. I request someone else to answer this if you want to give a try. Can someone answer this, please?
Yeah, I can try, Balaji. So from waterfall to Scrum, basically, the first thing that comes into my mind is the organizational challenges.
Okay.
And the second one is the communication challenges, the change communication challenges.
Okay.
And the third one is the technical mastery. So how is your environment connected and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth one, I see this in my experience that the coach or the scrum master or the contractor or the supplier insist on a framework and he wants to stick on that framework regardless to the momentum or the flow, actual flow, or for example, I remember that sometime before you said that you even skip PI meetings when the PI is ready already, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. In one
this
of my
kind of
earlier webinars, I have told that. Not in this webinar. Yes, correct. We have reached. Okay, what it means is we have reached a stage that no need for a program increment planning, because over a period of 18 months, my team has reached a maturity level of continuously prioritizing the epic, sub-epic feature and talking about multiple dependencies and architectural runway. So we have removed doing the PI planning. Yes, correct.
Yeah, so that's why. So don't stand on the framework. Rather, try to see which works well for that particular scenario or for that client or customer.
Okay.
So these are the challenges I see.
From my point of view, the same thing what I told for metrics is been applicable even for challenges. You can segregate like this: product related challenges, process related challenges, something like a team dynamics related challenges, and something like a stakeholder engagement challenges. Okay, see, I'm just giving some thoughts. Okay, you need not do it exactly the way I am suggesting. You think through and then change it. Product related challenges means whether product owner is aware of what is a user story, what is the difference between a definition of done and an acceptance criteria, what do you mean by a rolling wave backlog, what do you mean by a progressive elaboration. All these things need to be known. Process mechanism purely on the Scrum Master, like in terms of know what is a sprint, how do you set a sprint goal, how to do capacity planning, and the flow. Okay, product backlog refinement, then the sprint goals, sprint planning, then you do your daily stand-up call, then you have a sprint review or a demo, followed by the retrospective. So if it is a waterfall team, if I want to convert it into a Scrum or an Agile team, I will not coach them, I will train them. There is a difference between facilitation, mentoring, coaching, and training. You need to know which particular gear of the car to use when. It is like driving. Continuously shift the gear and then drive, right? You cannot go on the same drive for a long, same gear for a long time. Even in an automatic car, the gear used to change by itself. So the point is simple. When do I need to do training? When I need to do facilitation? When I need to do coaching? When I need to do consulting? You need to take a right mix. Okay, and that comes out of experience. So my suggestion is, if it is a waterfall team converting to Scrum, I will not do coaching, I will do training. 2 or 3 days I used to do training, give them all the knowledge needed. Then we will get into the coaching mentality. Because coaching is for someone who knows something but unable to remove the mental block. A pure waterfall team doesn't know anything on the Scrum. What's the point to coach them? You need to train them, right? So apply the right style of communication at the right place. Okay. If you people are okay with that answer, we can go to the next one. Okay. Any particular challenges, you can connect with me later. Yeah. Okay. Offline, you can connect with me. Okay. Anti-pattern. Someone told me in the WhatsApp, anti-pattern in Agile is another topic. Could you help us on from experience? So someone told it, so I just pasted it here. Okay. So you can tell like this, what are all the anti-patterns in Agile? Can someone tell me 1 or 2 examples, please?
Planning becoming refinement.
Sorry.
Planning ceremony becoming a refinement.
Okay.
Not able to understand the intent versus content behind definition of done, definition of ready, acceptance criteria. I think this is one of the major thing. They say, yeah, I'm doing DOR, acceptance criteria, but they don't know the actual details of the why we are doing that, Balaji.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. One of the thing is assigning story point to a task rather than a user story, and this has literally happened in one of the program. And let me tell the reason. It is not because of the team member is deliberately doing it. It is because a wrong kind of an SOW had been created, saying that based on the story points completed, billing will be done over a quarter. And if there is a more than 10% variance in the story point, 15% billing will be cut. So see, the point is this, the mistake to a problem happens somewhere else. It has been felt here. That doesn't mean that the team member need to be penalized. The manager has given an instruction to the team member, hey guys, if you miss out the story point, something will be there, a penalization, some reduction will be there, or something of that kind. Okay, I don't want to tell the nitty-gritties, but then something like that. So what happens is that these guys don't want to miss out the completed user item, completed action items. So they somehow talk to product owner, and somehow they talk to technical lead, and they are sizing the task, because their particular logic says, if a story has 5 tasks, if I completed 3 tasks, at least I can claim those points for the 3 tasks. So it is one of the Agile anti-pattern. So what we need to do, a lot of things we may need to do. Sometimes what will happen, if I go and tell to this team, that the team will tell, this is the trend we are following across the teams. So I used to go to the program level guy. Convey that this is wrong. From there, the communication should flow. Then all these guys will listen. So even telling the right thing, you need to tell it in the appropriate channel. Then only people will listen. Do you agree to that? Yeah, if you tell it to a team level, resistance was actually there. So what I did, I went all the way up and then told at a program level, hey, this is not a manner. That too, you are saying that you have executed 4 or 5 sprints. What? Because I came inside the team much later. See, it also depends upon when are you getting introduced to the team. At least right from the beginning, if you are there, you can have a good grip. Unfortunately, coaches and scrum masters will be inducted inside the team when the project is already in a red color. And they will tell scrum master has not done the work, or Agile is not working out for us. Okay, so my suggestion is you need to be clear, you need to play a little bit smart or diplomatic, that the business acumen should be there. For you to get these things done, where you need to take it up. And at the same time, you should not look like an escalation also. You need to do it in such a manner as if it's a program level communication flow. Then all these guys will do the work in a nice manner. Something like that you may need to do.
Correct. In our current engagement, client said very clearly, guys, if you do BDD, TDD, and DevOps in every iteration, we'll give you time. We'll give you training, certification, coaching, everything we'll provide you. maybe within a month time, if you are not getting into BDD, TD DevOps, we'll pull out. So the moment client said BDD, TD DevOps, the entire culture, the entire behavior of the team will change it, Balaji.
Okay, yeah, okay. I will check this out. Okay, okay. Correct.
So everybody was falling in line. The agile coach, the scrum master, the architect, the team members. Earlier they were saying that unit testing automation, TDD we don't know. Requirement testing automation, BDD we don't know. So client has spent money and provided training and certification to everybody. It took about 1 or 2 months. Now the entire culture and the behavior is changed towards whatever you are saying earlier, right? The defects, delays, dependencies, slowly they're getting into track.
Okay, okay. Okay. So I'm just thinking whenever I'm just taking a pause. Yes. So what I was trying to say is, see, in a large scale agile transformation, what we used to do, no, we used to have a communication plan in place saying that, see, if you take this as a client and if you take this as a vendor, do you think practically a scrum master working at a vendor level, let's say for a vendor team, can directly influence a senior vice president of a client side? Absolutely no, right? Practically you can tell. Forget about what does the book says. You need to find out an appropriate someone from your vendor team, leadership team, to convey that information to here. So what I'm trying to say is, you need to convey it here. This person will convey it here. Then from at this level, if the communication comes here, all the people will listen to it here. But if the same communication, if you tell from here, generally people will not listen. I understand it has taken a cycle time, but if this is the only way to get things done, at least let us get the things done through this manner. Over a period of time, then we can discuss about all this self-organized team, emerging team, cross-functional team. Because somewhere one guy asked me, agile principle says architecture emerges out of the team, no? Then why do you have enterprise architect, solution architect, a system architect? The simple answer, I told him that, okay, remove the architect and try to execute the project and then see. The outcome is going to tell whether what's been written as a principle can be directly applied in an industry level practice. Yes, architecture emerges out of the team, provided the team is cross-functional, but the team is not cross-functional, right? Unless and until you reach that state of maturity, how we can expect that architecture will emerge from the team? Someone need to be there to show the direction. So take all these things with a pinch of salt in terms of translating this agile manifesto and principles. Does it really echo in my ecos? Yes, it will echo, but not now, or rather right at the moment. Something if I do, then it will echo, because in those principles, the preconditions are assumed as if, see, if you read SAFe, if you go to SAFe framework, portfolio backlog, solution backlog, program backlog is all neatly positioned. In a real-time industry, you need to work towards it. You need to sweat it and then get it done. What they show in Scaled Agile framework diagram is the final state of existence. But we are not there in the final state of existence. So you need to drive the show to get the things done. That's what I'm just trying to tell. Okay. Okay, let's look into this last question. How to start or convert a team to a scaled framework? Okay, someone was asking in that WhatsApp group, what could be the challenges when you are trying to scale up with multiple teams? See, the challenges is, apart from your team level ceremonies, you need to think about program level ceremonies and portfolio level cadences. For example, which I generally used to draw, you have your team level ceremonies, right? Product backlog, sprint planning, demo. You think about program level cadences, product owners sync up, product managers sync up, scrum of scrum meeting, feature backlog refinement, ARTs sync up. Then I also have portfolio level cadences, epic and sub-epic cleanup, investment themes, mapping it to rally, okay, using something called the EBCM, enterprise business capability model. So if you have relevant program level and portfolio level cadences, then scaling will not be a challenge. Okay, any suggestions or thoughts? Yes, I have my own group called the Agile Enthusiast WhatsApp group. Someone from this team is already a part of it. Possibly I can add you people. And before we end the call, no, you can just ping all your phone numbers here. Apart from those who are already there, I will take new phone number and I will add it. Okay. Okay. So, see, before you talk about in terms of the scaling, right, just try to understand the deployment or the client ecosystem. Are we talking about scaling at a product line level or at a product group level, right? How are you positioned as of now? So you need to understand that, and then you need to start with the pilot teams. You take 3 or 4 teams, try to form a program level team within that, because a program is a combination of multiple projects, right, towards a higher objective. Form a program team. You start introducing elements by elements. So one second, because this is important. I think it is okay if I slightly take some more time. See. Let's say you are implementing SAFe. Don't ever start with a full SAFe. It is like we are killing ourselves. Start with essential SAFe. Unless and until you are done with essential SAFe, don't go to large solution portfolio full SAFe. Because one guy is not even able to understand addition and multiplication. How we can teach summation and integral calculus to him? First, make him understand the basic thing. Start with essential SAFe. Create quick wins, execute it for few program increments. Then your maturity will come to a level. When there is a vendor and a supplier, then go for a solution, because solution train is only for vendor and a supplier. If not, why to go for a solution train? Every train comes with a cost. Then you think about lean portfolio management. Okay, at a portfolio level. And one more thing. One of the manager came to me last week and then told me, hey, Balaji, we need to do a lean portfolio management exercise. I told fine. But then I asked him one question. Are you done with your portfolio management first? You are telling me to do a lean portfolio management, but without solving the existing problems of portfolio management, I don't want to bring in the lean concept on the top of it. So do some groundwork first before jumping, right? So before introducing lean portfolio management, lean budgets and guardrails, I need to make sure that existing portfolio is good enough, deemed fit to introduce lean. See, let me show you a practical thing. See, this is a horizontal budget guardrail, which we do in a lean portfolio budgeting using a tool called a target process. You can Google it later. There is a tool called the target process. If you use that tool, you can do a lean portfolio budgeting, wherein emerging, investing, extracting, retiring, and evaluating across the program increments. Program increment 1, 2, 3, 4. I can get this done provided you do a good element of portfolio management first. Without solving that portfolio management, if I put lean on it, it is an overhead. So introduce right things only at the right time. Do not introduce it much early. At the same time, don't introduce it too late. Right? You need to know when you need to want to throw a stone on a tree to get the fruit. Neither before nor too late. So find the right time to introduce things. If you introduce it at the wrong time, it will be a burden on you as an agile coach. So first we did some portfolio management cleanup activities. Then I took this lean. Then I had a centralized cloud instance of target process, and then we did a horizontal budgeting. Whatever you see here, right? Horizon budget guardrails. This is practical. What I show here is the theory. See here, guardrails. You have a term guardrails, right? Whatever you read here, no theoretically. I'm just showing it in that one diagram practically. Okay. Okay, any other questions before? I just want to talk about my mentorship program for 1 or 2 minutes, but before that, any other questions?
Yeah, one question, Balaji. While we had a conversation with the client engagement team.
Okay.
So they asked us, they are getting it's like a greenfield. First time they are moving into agile transformation.
Okay.
They're from a pharma background, Balaji.
Okay.
So agile piece, we could able to explain that team level agile, the Scrum, Kanban, DevOps, XP. They're able to appreciate, understand our definition of agile part. When I asked about transformation part, they asked us to give one or two simple meaning and example.
Okay.
So what we said is that transformation means outcome-based approach. So measuring outcome-based approach, measuring business outcomes. Any other simple meaning, one or two examples of outcome-based transformation? What is the meaning of transformation piece? One or two examples from you, Balaji.
No, what you can do is you can do an OKR workshop, objective and key result. Okay, let me tell 2 or 3 points which come to my mind. One way to address that problem is you can start doing an OKR workshop to understand what is the objective and the key result area where we need to improve, which could be one thing. The other way to address this problem is there is something called plan for strategic refactoring. What it means is you are doing a business workflow level optimization. We have seen that value stream mapping, right? Wherein you are actually talking about the flow efficiency. Similarly, across the product line or across the product groups, I'm taking the top 4 or 5 problems. And then we will do a brainstorming activity to solve the problem. Because what is the use of transformation when I'm not solving the current problems, right? So this is the theory. Now let me show you something practically. See, for example, something like this. What is the context? Okay, contextual to the problem statement. What is the problem statement? What is the impacted business outcome? What could be the proposed solution? What is the envisaged business benefit? How do you measure your success? And how do you define your success? Like this, we used to do something called a strategic refactoring. This is not a code level refactoring as obvious. This is a business workflow level optimization. Like this also you can do. Or else, like I told you, you can take a OKR and then probably you can do an OKR workshop to understand the objective and the KPI, and then try to do something in your transformation which will fulfill the KPI. So you can actually connect with me offline. I will let you know.
Sure, sir. Thanks, Bal.
Okay.
That helps.
This is this is something I'm just giving the tip of the iceberg. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if you are done, right? 1 second. Let me.
Hi, Balaji. This is Swati.
Yes, Swati.
So I have a question. In our current ongoing team, the impediments came that one of the key member where the dependency is so much on the last quarter to complete this project, and the person has announced that he's going for some reason, and when we tried to retain that particular person who is a key member, but he has kept some condition which seems to be pretty difficult to fulfill, because this is a project where it's not an internal project and working with the client, and as you explained, so it is the same project where the product owner is the client only, and where we have given all the resources that is from our side. So now in this situation, what should be the solution, whether, because this is a key member, so we should we should retain this person with all his condition, or we should move out to look for a new member, and the other way around, we also tried to look for a new member because the condition was seems to be pretty difficult based on the discussion with the client and the vendor, and because on the interest of time, last quarter and the only 2 months is left, so difficult to get a new member and train them. So what should be the best solution, or we can come up with anything?
Okay, so let me tell you my perspective. See, if an organization is struggling to find a replacement, that shows the ineffectiveness of the organization, actually speaking. Because if an organization says that, hey, this guy has submitted paper and the client actually wants this guy, but somehow this guy is not he is not coming to the terms of our condition, and I
Yeah.
difficulty to have a replacement, that shows the ineffectiveness of the organization as such. Because I have been in a similar situation. There actually happened to be a situation wherein we had a challenge in tuning a database query. At the time, what we know within the organization, we started bringing the experts from across the globe to solve the problem. And the client was asking me, hey guys, do you run an organization or what you guys do? To tune a query, if there is no capability from the Agile Center of Excellence, okay, it is not an Agile Center of Excellence, by the way. It is something like, okay, what the client is saying is, I have given this project to you, trusting that you are not people dependent, you are process dependent. It means independent of incoming and outgoing signals, your process should have the capability to handle it. If not, it is a high time for the organization to take a pause, or maybe the knowledge dissemination was not been factored right from the beginning. And this guy wanted to keep everything in his control, right? Because sometimes no people will not share their knowledge because they may have a fear. Hey, if I share the knowledge, then I may share a unique selling. Like, no, I will lose my unique selling proposition. But generally, people who have shallow knowledge will only have that fear. Because if my knowledge is abundant enough, irrespective of by sharing, I'm only growing, then what's the point? What's the fear to share it? So it is something your organization need to work on. Why there is so much of person dependent? Because now what will happen? No, if that person, if your organization fulfills that person, then it may become a trend in the company. Like every guy will start doing like that. Okay, once we
Yeah.
see paper, and if there is a demand from the client, see, and company will anyway listen to the tunings of me, right? So you need to think from n number of perspectives why it is so critical. Okay, you know that the person is very critical at the same, and that itself is a risk.
Right, and we can create as a cross-functional team that some backup should be there. So I want to give one more here. If I got the point, and so if that person, key person, is a Scrum Master, means in that case, I just want to know.
See, whatever be the role, yeah. See, the world is not waiting for a single person, right? So why there is, it is the dependency what we ourselves project in front of the client. Sometimes, yes, there is a dependency, but sometimes what happens, no, due to the lethargic mentality of the vendor, they try to project or zoom as if everything is been given because of this person. I generally
Agree.
see in an agile driven engagement, we do not entertain superheroes, we entertain teams.
Teams, yeah. So if one person is going, the other person can handle it. Should be not the people dependent, and it should be more on the process
Correct. And one
oriented.
more thing, one more thing, even from a demand supply mapping pipeline, there should be some proactive measures for critical roles, that too for premium clients, right?
Okay, yeah,
Because
I
from a
see.
PMO, I'm not talking about agile PMO, I'm talking about general PMO, like a project management office or a demand supply office at an organization level. Who are all my premium clients? You need to take a list. And within the premium clients, who are all the critical resources? All these critical resources are slippery roads. Anytime they can leave us and then go. So what is a proactive plan in place? See, what I do, what I suggest, it depends on what side of the fence I am. If I am the resource, okay, then I will talk differently. But if I am representing the company, then I will talk it differently, right? Yeah. So
Right,
that's
right. Agree.
what
Thank you so much. Yeah.
what side of the fence am I? But don't encourage heroic culture in an agile driven engagement. This is the problem happened in some of the companies. Then because project managers had a fear that, oh, because of this agile scrum, I may lose this job. So first of all, we also need to create psychological safety for the people. Because
Yeah, and few project they don't follow full-fledged agile also, even though it is there everything, but they mix it and they don't follow everything.
okay, so what you may need to do is please look into this particular topic called agile suitability filters.
Okay.
Later on, go in the go to Google and then read as agile suitability filter plus a PMI guide. It will tell
Okay.
you not all problems are not all projects are suitable for agile also.
Okay.
Find
Okay.
out the right candidate to be executed in the right methodology. Don't force all the projects.
Okay. Sure, Balaji. Thank you so much for my question. Thank you so much.
Okay. See, because this hybrid model is there, no, a kind of a waterfall model, but inside you have your sprints. Hybrid model should be viewed as a agile transition strategy. Okay, so all these things you can get some details from agile suitability filters, which come under PMI guide. Okay,
Okay, sure.
I think some of our friends have already dropped. Okay, so in the interest of time, no, I'll just quickly wrap up with my agile mentorship program and then I will end the call. Okay, so this is a kind of a mentorship program what I currently have. Some of the people knows it. To actually different levels or aspirations, I have a different plans or a different lesson plans. Okay, level 1, level 2, level 3, 4, 5 and all. And these are all some of the testimonials which has been given by some of the some of my mentees. Some of them in this group are already my mentees. So I run a program called Agile Mentorship Program to actually plug the gap between what we learn out of certification and what is being expected in a real-time industry. Okay, always there is a gap, right? So I am also coming up with some different lesson plans for different target audience. These are all some of the what to tell, a kind of a testimonial. So just thought to put it over here. So if you are interested, then you can connect with me offline for a detailed discussion on this particular mentorship program. Okay, this is a kind of a detailed view. For example, see, okay, like, you know, ideally speaking, if you are at the level of a scrum master, then ideally you need to aspire to become a team level agile coach. Then probably you may need to aspire to become an enterprise coach. Okay, currently I am playing the role of an executive or a leadership coach. So in this agile mentorship program, I give you the techniques. I also give you the real-time templates and also try to come up with your personalized or contextualized need. Where what is your struggle and how I can be of a help to you. So feel free to connect with me offline on further details pertaining to this. Okay, fine. I'll stop sharing. Let me take a look into the chat. Okay, like I will take a look into the chat offline. Anyway, people have given their numbers, right? That should actually suffice for now. Okay, so we can wrap up the call, right? All right, any other questions? Sri Nagesh or someone, any other questions?
It's a good Balaji. It's really very comprehensive and we really learned a lot many things in this.
Okay.
Thank you, Balaji. This was really informative.
Very
Whole session.
And
Thanks, Balaji. I think
Thank you all.
Yeah,
I
so
think you
what
motivated
I
many
will
of
also
us.
upload this video on the YouTube. I will also going to upload this video on the YouTube. You can take a look into it later.
Yeah, Balaji, before winding up, I have